Hello, good evening, and welcome, welcome, welcome. My sincerest apologies for keeping you all waiting. Technology doesn't just seem to have a baiting moment sometimes when it comes to not cooperating. But we are here anyway. Thank you to everybody who has stayed and waited patiently. And for all those who have just joined, welcome to the program. As you know, today, as it was advertised, today we are discussing the NHS and how we interact with the service. How do you interact with the service that the NHS provides? Now, the NHS is 72 years old. It's one of, a huge institution here in the United Kingdom for every single one of us. It's in all our hearts. Not only do we use it, but we at one point or another, every single one of us will either have used it or know somebody who has used it or who is working within the NHS. Now, they say that the BAME community make up a huge population of the NHS workforce. And, not only that, but they also, unfortunately, not the workforce, but those of us within the society always seems to not have the same kind of experience as our white counterparts. But that's not all we're discussing today. So we want to explore, how it works, what happens within, what we should expect, and how it'd be great to hear you share your experiences as well. The NHS themselves have spent a lot of time, a lot of money working on how to ensure that you and I, as patients, that we have, a good experience when we come to use the services that they provide. The patient's experience is huge on their list, and they've gone out of their way to make it so. So, is that really working? Is it beneficial? Have you benefited from that? Have you experienced it? How does it affect you? Today, for us to have this conversation, I have two Amazons. They have been contributing to the development of our NHS and what it is for, it's probably a lifetime when you put their combined years of service together. It's a lifetime for some. But I'm so privileged, and I think it's amazing to have them both together here today to, have this conversation with me, because I couldn't think of any two people that were better to do so. Not to say that there aren't many out there, so please don't take offense if you're watching and you're within the NHS. But today I have the privilege of having with us here Dr. Lola Banjoku. She's a co-convener of Better Health for Africa. Dr. Lola, you're welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time. And joining Dr. Lola tonight is the midwife supremo, Wendy Olayiwola, FRSA. She's the senior midwifery manager and president of the Nigerian Nurses Association. Wendy, you're welcome to the program. How are you today?
Thank you very much, Priscilla. Thank you for having me. I'm great. And how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for asking. Doc, how are you doing? Have you had a full-on day? Has it been easy for you today?
It's a busy day. I've been very, very busy.
Wow.
But I don't see any other day in the last, I would say, 7 months where it has not been busy. Because I actually work in Brighton where the initial sort of COVID incident started. So it's been a long marathon and still is.
Wow. On that note, let me just ask both of you, during the whole COVID pandemic lockdown situation, most of us were either working from home or we were at home. So to an extent, some of us had a break. But for the two of you, as you've just said, Doc, it's been a marathon for you. Wendy, what was it for you? How did you, what did you do in that time, and how are you feeling now, for instance?
Thank you, Priscilla. I must say that it's still a marathon. We are still on it. We have not really, left the marathon. Yes, the pandemic is easing, but the work, we are catching up on so many things and trying to embrace whatever this normal is at the moment. So it's been crazy. It's been busy. A lot of us haven't had time off, and especially those that are classified as being healthy. some of us cannot work from home because we cannot deliver babies while at home. So we have to come here, and a lot of, obviously, people have to go in to do, especially the frontline staff. So when it comes to clinical issues, that cannot be done from home.
Oh, well, before I go any further, let me say thank you to both of you and to all your colleagues, and for every healthcare professional that's working, that has worked throughout, that works within the system, and that are watching tonight. We appreciate everything you do. I am still advocating for our government to pay better and not just clap hands. But on that note, let's try and move on to the subject of the night, of the evening. We'll come to the COVID situation and experience a bit later. But let's talk about the NHS, because I think for most of us, we tend to just sort of walk in there. I mean, let me speak for myself, for instance. In times past, when I've been unwell, I've come into the hospital and I've been taken care of. And I've walked away and not thought twice of it, or I've returned when I've been asked to and I've received a service. But I want to, it would be great to hear from you both to tell us. Doc, let me start with you. Tell us a little bit about, because, like you said, you're working in Brighton. You've been there for quite some, not just there, but you've been within the system for quite some time, over 20 odd years. Tell us how the system works. Beyond me just walking in as I do and I sort of get served.
Yes, thanks, Priscilla. The NHS can be complex when you're not familiar with it. There are visible parts of the NHS and there are invisible parts of the NHS. And I tend to describe the NHS in 4 buckets, how people engage with it. So the first thing is you can engage with it in a proactive, preventive manner, i.e. you do all that is required, like take up screening opportunities, you have your blood pressure, you do your regular MOTs, and you take the prescription, as I would call it, and I don't mean medical prescription, I mean the non-medical prescription, so you're in a better place, and I call that the preventive. So one of the challenges we have within the Black community is that we don't take screening. People don't go for cervical screening, breast screening, prostate screening. They don't see it as necessary. And part of that is linked to the way we have been trained, especially if you're from a developing country like within the continent, Africa, where actually you only engage with the healthcare services when you need the treatment. So you therefore have a reactive, curative approach to the NHS. So the NHS is set up in such a manner that it is there to provide that proactive, preventive approach. And that's why it is centered initially around primary care. And primary care is your GP practice. It's the pharmacies on the high street where you can actually go in now and ask for a health check. It is the optometrist where you can do eye checks, so that because things are detected. Also, it is the dentist. And this is another thing people don't understand. Going to the dentist sometimes does detect some underlying health conditions, So I actually did train as a dentist and I worked in Max Facts, and there are a lot of cancers in the mouth or conditions that sometimes first manifest, and the first person to pick that up will be the dentist. So regular checkups, regular engagement. When you get a letter saying coming for this, coming for that, it's actually not to be thrown in the dustbin. It's actually to be taken up and seen as an opportunity to engage.
Yeah.
And then the other part for me is when you then come through that window called primary care, using all those windows I've described, they will then refer you as where necessary. So, if you need any acute health or mental health. Now, the challenge is because of religious and cultural beliefs, sometimes people actually do not use the mental health services also, because even sometimes physical health, because they believe I'll either pray about it, or it's not my portion, or I don't believe in it, or I wouldn't have this. And I always say to people, it's like you don't take car insurance because you don't believe. It's not whether you believe you'll have an accident. It is to make sure you are proactively preventing yourself should you need it. And then the other final thing I wanted to say is then when you're in the service, engage with the service. And when I mean engage, I said everybody that is resident in the UK pays for the NHS. It is not a free service. It is free at the point of access. You pay for it in your taxes. So when you go, you should expect a service not different from anybody else. So be informed, be engaged, ask questions, and if you have issues, I always say to people, have you made a complaint? Oh, I don't want to complain. I say, no, you do complain in a nice, polite manner because it's a paid for service. And that's what people don't recognize. They think it is free because they don't ask you for cash upfront when you're, accessing the service, but you do pay for it.
You know what, you've made some great points there. Two points there that I want to just briefly, Wendy, I'm coming to you in a moment, that I just want to briefly engage you on, Doc. You spoke about the mental health aspect and the fact that people generally, would rather pray about it and not sort of engage with it. But do you think that may have something to do with our lack of understanding of the need for of what mental health is and its effect, and how it kickstarts, for instance, and when we say mental health, it's not when you're cuckoo and you're out in the streets, for instance, and can no longer recognize yourself. Do you think it's because of our lack of understanding of what mental health entails that prevents?
Yes, I think it's both. I think it is both in that there's a lack of understanding. So people think mental health, as you described, Priscilla, is the way you see it. Back, I recall when I was in Nigeria, you will see somebody on the road and you can tell that they have mental health issues, and people identify with that. Whereas mental health ranges from low mood, depression, anxiety, worries, and sometimes actually just sitting down and understanding, either with a psychotherapist or someone, not, to be able to support you in your journey. We all go through phases. Somebody who has lost somebody, I would expect if if it's a really close loved one, that they might be going through a slight depression. Someone who's lost a job, someone who's concerned and not sleeping because of certain issues. So that's one thing, is lack of awareness. But also the belief sometimes is shrug it off and get on with life. And actually, there are some things that you can't necessarily shrug off. People's life experiences vary, and your ability to cope, varies. And what people have to understand is your mental health sometimes can impact on your physical health. High blood pressure is as a result sometimes of the anxiety and worry, and then it goes into many other conditions.
Oh, that's so true. And the other thing you mentioned, because you're saying so much, and I'm trying to pick up on them. You said something really important about engaging with the service, because I think what most of us forget all the time is, because we do not directly by ourselves make that payment to the NHS, we naturally just assume it is free. But you've just reminded us that no, it is not free. It's not a free service, and we should engage. Now, how do we get this message across to the public, to say, especially within our Afro-Caribbean society here in the United Kingdom, about the fact that, yes, you go in and at the point of service, you're not having to pay money before you're seen, but you have paid for this as long as you're paying your taxes. How do we get people to get above that point of being, Wendy, I haven't forgotten you, I'm coming, of getting to that point where we say, you should engage and you should ask questions. How do we get people past not asking?
So the first thing I always say to people is, if you look at your taxes that you pay in this country, I think that should be a quick reminder, because we do pay, we're high on taxes, but we're high on taxes for a reason, because of the social insurance, the national insurance that we all pay. So that if, that at any point in time, and one of the beauties, and I'm going to have to say boldly and proudly, of the NHS is that none of us, all throughout COVID, not one of us thought about the money. When you want to access the healthcare, system in this country, I always say I don't hear anybody here saying, oh, I don't have money, I can't go to my GP. In fact, I do think sometimes we abuse it because we're not paying at the point of access. But the thing is, we have all paid for it. And people should if you look at your national insurance payments, if you look at your tax payments, you are contributing to. Even I reminded someone the other day, I said, they said they were on benefits, they weren't paid. I said, no, you are. The government has taken the taxes, if you look at it, from your benefits. And even though you're collecting benefits, you are still contributing because it is about the protection for all. And that's the beauty that we have in this country, that we can access the service without even thinking. I mean, one of the major causes of ill health in the continent of Africa is because people are out of pocket. Yes. And so they cannot access healthcare services. Also, in America, people then fall sick in America also because they have to pay at the point of access. None of us have that. And this is the beauty. It's not perfect, the NHS, because nowhere is perfect. But I always say to people, you don't even have to blink or think about it. But you have to remember you pay for it, and you therefore must engage with it, and you must use it like a service that you have paid for.
I really appreciate that. Thank you so much, Doc. It's so important for us to remember that we're paying for it, and not to, just sort of cower and run away when it's important for us to engage. I appreciate that. Wendy, let me come to you because I just learned, as I was getting ready for the show today, I just learned that the NHS actually has a constitution. We're not going to go into all of that, but I just want to learn from you. What are some of these constitutions pertaining to us as patients when we're coming in? And of course, there will be an aspect for staff as well. So what are some of the pointers for us, the constitution that benefits us when we're coming in as a patient?
Thank you, Priscilla. Yes, NHS has a constitution that governs it. And I think it's about 13 to 14 documents, and everyone can have access to that as a patient as well as a staff. Just like you said, just the pointers, there are 7 principles. So before I go into the principles, so the Constitution has 7 principles. It has NHS values as well as pledges. So it's all divided into those portions. And within the principles are 7 principles that governs the NHS.
Very quickly, what are the 7 principles?
It's quite a lot. If you have the time, I'm happy to go deep into it for you. I'm not an expert on this, but I'll just mention. So I'll just mention 1 or 2 out of those 7 principles. The first one is NHS provides a comprehensive service available to all. So just like Dr. Banjoko said, the services in the NHS, they are not free, but they are free at the point of care, at the point that is needed.
Yeah.
So, and NHS is for all. It doesn't matter who you are. And for those of us that are familiar with the 7 characteristics, those are the things that governs the 4th principle of the NHS. So it's comprehensive service for all, including pregnancy. And another one that I want to pick up from the 7th principle is the patient is at the heart of what the NHS do. So everything of that. Sorry?
Priority to the patients, effectively.
Absolutely. Patient is in the center of, is that the center of all NHS does. So that's the principle. So that's for the patient. And for the staff, it's more of the pledges for the staff. Again, there are 7 pledges to the staff as well. And the first one, just to pick 2 again, as you said, is to provide a positive working environment for everyone, both clinical and non-clinical staff that works in the NHS, and also to provide support and opportunity to staff to maintain their health and well-being. So it's not only about patient well-being, but as well as staff well-being.
Okay. Oh, wow. So now you mentioned pledges.
Yes,
so just tell me very quickly, because we have so much to cover today, what are some of the pledges that are available for us, that the NHS pledges to us as patients when we come in?
to get quality care. There's quite a lot of them. Like I said, it's about 15 to 16 pages, NHS document, constitution document. So
Yeah.
one of the pledges for the patient is to get a good quality care, obviously free at the point of care, have access.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the pledges. To access is available to everyone that is able to access it, and it's free to all as well.
Now, I know we're talking about access, and we're talking about the fact that, and I'm just going to just go off topic for just a moment, talking about the fact that, we all have access to it. We don't have to pay at the point of access, and that's fantastic. But I also know that when you're coming and, there's been a lot of conversations about those who do not have leave to remain. What does that mean for them? Is access still available to them? Because they don't have leave, they're not paying taxes, for instance, they're not citizens, or they don't have the right to be here. What does that mean for them?
So
there isn't any change. Dr. Banjoko, I'll let you come in.
Yeah. So for those who are not tax paying, they actually are not entitled. I'll be honest with you.
Okay.
And I always remind people, it is a national health service. It is not an international. It is taxes. I remind people because it is taxes, and I understand the challenges in other countries, but imagine if everybody came, and I have had, as a director, I have had to say no, they're not entitled. So if you don't put into the system, you obviously can't be taken out. Having said that, there is some beauty about this country also, and a lot of it happened over at the height of COVID. For those who do need it, like asylum seekers and people who are not refugees, they will provide care. Okay. They would provide care, for them that is necessary, which is different from people who come on a holiday and want to use the NHS. And I just remind people when people start arguing, I said, well, actually, if you do that and everybody started taking out from where they haven't put in, it means that it's unfair. So you, Priscilla, as an example, if just because you pay taxes, you can't say, I want this A-star treatment, I want to be treated like a movie star, I want all this and that. You can't. Because what I meant is that there are some things we will say. Some people will come in and say, I want a side ward, and I want this, and I want that, and I want that, and we have to say, hang on. If you want all that, I think you have to go private. It's a leveler. The NHS is a leveler. It's a leveler in that if you're a billionaire and you enter inside the NHS, you will be treated the same as the person who is a homeless person. You will be treated the same. You will not be treated any different. So when you want your perks, you have to go private. It is, and Wendy is nodding. That is another beauty about the NHS, is that everybody gets the same treatment. Boris Johnson, when he went into the hospital, yes, they might have had some security, but it was the same treatment that he had that others had. And that's the thing. So, for those who are refugees and are going through the process, there is. But tourists, people who are visiting and haven't paid taxes, no, they're not entitled.
Okay. Thank you so much, both of you.
I just add to what Dr. Banjoko said, Priscilla.
Yeah.
Especially if I have to wear my midwifery hat for our pregnant women, especially in our community. Yes, it's not free, especially if you do not have the right immigration status. However, it is you are still allowed to come in and declare and engage with the service and access the service. As a pregnant woman, you will not be charged at that point. They will probably charge you, towards the end of your pregnancy when you've had your baby, when every mother and babies are fine, then that's when that bill will come through. So it is very important that you do not think of your legal status first, but think about your pregnancy and access the service early.
Okay, I see. So even though you come in, for instance, you don't have status here, but you need the help.
Yes.
That will be given to you, but then you will pay a bill afterwards.
Afterwards. That's correct.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Now, I want to now talk about, I know that, say from about 2010, 2011, the NHS have been doing a lot of work on, a lot of drive on their patients' experience, as I mentioned at the top of the program. And there were reports upon reports that's looked into the experience that patients should have, and they came up with, there are certain areas that were mentioned that this reflected in all the different reports, by the way, and those areas were care, culture, religion, and I think those were the three main areas, and obviously the service that's provided. And I want us to just look at that, for instance, now. How both of you work within the system, and I want to look at it primarily first of all, as you that work within the system, because obviously it also affects you. How did that change that was brought about, or those reports or those efforts that were being made, how did both of you find that? How did that impact you? Because I know you've both given well over 10 years of service each. So you would have been there. You've been there since the time of these reports and before that. So, Doc, if you could go first and just tell me, what was the effect of that for you, first of all, as an individual, and of course, within your profession?
So as an individual, and every one of us are at some point in time a patient, even though you work in the NHS, you're at some point in time a patient within the NHS, because we still have GPs, even those we're working in, and we still sometimes use it ourselves or our family. So another thing about the NHS, as you rightly pointed out, Priscilla, is patient and public engagement.
Yeah.
It's one of the constitutional rights that if you are making any changes to services, you must engage the patients and the population which you are serving. It is a must. And that is the pillar to that is that there is a belief, and rightly so, that the patients and public actually are the best in terms of users of the service, and like I said, taxpayers are best able to shape and co-design. So on the basis of that, to be able to inform that, there's the things like the friends and family test, that everybody who touches the NHS, either through GPs, so some of you would sometimes get this random survey where you have to talk about your GP experience or your experience at the hospital, and it's pulled together, and providers are ranked. And some of that actually goes towards CQC, looking, if the responses are very bad, then CQC will visit, because the NHS is very regulated, very, very regulated. And those results actually become a result that you then have to act on. You have to act on. And through that, you find that there is a lot more engagement. So things like having translation services. So if you go to areas where they're predominantly people from ethnic minority, you will find that there are translation services. You will find in every hospital there is a patient complaints department called PAL, where you can make a complaint. And everything then begins to shape the service, either through the patient information that is given to the patients before they access service, and some of that's the learning that they have got. I don't know if you're aware that there is an organization called Health Watch, that is a regulatory body that is meant to make sure that they're scrutinizing the NHS on behalf of the patients. Another thing I do in my position is that I am regularly called by the local authority to come and face scrutiny on issues that the local patients have raised about any healthcare. I go through sort of a session where I have to do, face the local authority councillors and explain any issues and actions we are taking in response. Yeah. You also see that nationally, where sometimes in Parliament, if there's an issue that is very big, then people from the NHS are called to scrutinize. And that is driven, like you said, Priscilla, from the engagement and the outputs of patients and public. And one of that has been the need to make sure things are culturally sensitive, but also not just from the point of view of patients, also from the point of view of what the NHS needs to serve the patient. So there's been a lot about blood transfusion as an example. and lack of donors in the Black community.
Wow.
And you will see them deliberately going to what I would call diaspora media to try and advertise. In the days when we had Notting Hill Gate Carnival, you will see the blood transfusion there. I said in the days because, of course, we're not having it this year, but you will see them there trying to make sure they improve the awareness within the Black community of the need to donate blood, because without donating blood, it has an impact on us. So it's a cyclical thing. You get the information, you improve the service, but you also inform and engage the population you're serving.
Thank you so much for that, Doc. Wendy, let me come to you. You know, from your experience, how the whole patient's experience, and of course, you as a patient and you as one who works within the NHS.
Oh, thank you, Priscilla. I think Dr. Banjoko has really said quite a lot about patient experience. Patient experience is very important in all we do. Like I said, the Constitution says they are in the center of what we do. So the experience is very important. And the feedback through FFT that Dr. Banjoko said is very important, because that's how we improve the service. And again, within our community, we are not very good at actually giving feedback. We complain a lot. But when it comes to giving feedback, officially, or complaining as in not writing it, we have each hospital or each trust, we have something they call PALS, which is patient, advisory liaison section in any hospital. So you can put your complaint through. Complaint is not necessarily a negative thing. It is to improve the service, and also to add more, to understand more culture, more things within that community. Because if that is not being expressed out, it is very hard for the service provider to actually embed the cultural and the religion or religious things into the service. So it is important as a community, if you have any issues, just put it into writing. And that's number one. And number two, especially again, this is I don't want to go outside my comfort zone in terms of being a midwife and mothers. It is important that the feedback that we get from maternity from our BAME or ethnic minority, Black and brown mothers, is very important to improve the maternity services, especially in terms of access and engagement. So the experience and the feedback goes hand in hand.
Thank you both so much. And on that note, I want us to now look at, you've both spoken so much about what the service provides and some of the challenges or problems that, the patients may have, and it could be the patient's fault, for instance. So on that note, during the whole COVID and the pandemic situation, the outcome we were told, were that people of BAME communities were more likely to die. There's also the fact that, the noted fact that, and Wendy, this is within your comfort zone. More Black women, Black and brown women, are more likely to die at childbirth than their white counterparts. Now, I'm going to come back to you now, Doc. In those two areas that, is very much at the forefront of our conversation, our news conversation in recent times, would you say that where we've talked about patients, all the work that the NHS is doing to engage with the community, improve patient care, culture and all of that, do you think that culture and as Wendy have said, our lack of engagement by not sharing on our experiences, good or bad, could have had anything to do with why we are heading on those two statistics, for instance, in those two areas?
Yeah, thanks, Priscilla. I think obviously a lack of engagement. I did start early by saying that we engage late, so we are resilient. I always tell people that resilience sometimes has its disadvantage in that early symptoms.
Resilient. I'm going to come to you. I'm going to come back to you on that, but continue.
Okay, thank you, Priscilla. When I mean resilience, we suffer a lot. So the symptoms other people might have, and they'll be quick to go and seek help, we will shrug it off. Shrug it off for many reasons. First, that's what I meant by resilience. We will shrug it off. But in COVID, actually, early symptoms and early identification was important, because if you detect it late, then it becomes a crisis and very difficult to manage. So that's one thing that, in terms of making sure that but having said all that, I think there were a number of things that brought about that disparity. And one is decision making in the NHS is dominated. I mean, I am an executive in the NHS, but I would say I'm a lonely BAME executive. They're just a handful like me, So when you become a lone voice around the table making decisions, it is challenging. And when the crisis happened, the need for awareness of the diversity of the people that we're serving just took lesser priority. So I'm sure you would have seen, even I found it quite amusing, and I'm sure some of you would have heard London Transport at one point in time had an announcement in Yoruba to tell people to stay away because they recognized the audience they were targeting and recognized therefore that they had to communicate in a different way. Whereas our communication channels, and these are things we're now saying loud and clear, the communication channels were BBC, were mainstream media. Many from the BAME community don't even look at BBC. They look at shows like yours. They look at ethnic TV. They read ethnic. I would say to people that there are some people from the BAME community, their engagement outside their day job does not involve the engagement that the government used for most of their communication. So a lot of things flew over people's heads. And then I spoke earlier about culture and religion. If you look at many of our interactions, I was fully aware that some people thought that prayer meetings was excluded from gatherings, even if they were gathering in somebody's house for a prayer meeting. And I had to say, well, no, actually, they said, but if they're praying, that, they didn't think that if they were praying that...
breathing the same air. Is that not ignorance more than anything?
Well, I wouldn't say, I think sometimes I would say people do not underestimate the power of belief in the in the African community. When people believe in something, it's reasoning and actually understanding that even with your belief, it says be wise. So those were some of the things. And Wendy would laugh when I say this. I did say to Wendy that some of the places we went to buy our food, I didn't see any social distancing where I went to buy my African food. I saw everybody dipping their hand into where the okra, the lady's fingers were, and I'm picking it, and then and I said to people that this is a bit odd. We are supposed to be socially distancing. It's the same gloves that they've used to give me the money that they're using. So there are some things that but having said all this, institutional racism and does have a major role to play, because racism is not being interpersonal racism. I always say to people there is a difference between interpersonal racism, where people actually say racism, to institutional and systemic racism. So institutional racism meant that there was ignorance and lack of awareness on the wider community that they're serving, and therefore the vulnerabilities that needed to be addressed.
Right. Thank you so much for that. And again, two things, but I need to come to you, Wendy, on that. Within your jurisdiction as the midwife, and managing as well, just share your thoughts on that.
Thank you, Priscilla. I think I'm very conscious of the time, because I don't think you have your whole time to listen to this. but it is a
Oh,
platform. Is a platform to pass an important message to our community. I'm
yeah.
sure everybody by now should be aware of 5 times more. What does that mean? 5 times more that somebody like me or someone from my community will die in pregnancy. Not
Yes.
in Nigeria, not anywhere in Africa, but here in the UK.
Mm.
So this is a reality. And this statistics has been going on for so many years and it's not getting better for that community, for Black and Asian community, it is getting worse. So it is our responsibility, and thank you for bringing us on to this platform today to let people know that it is reality. And how do we stop that? It's not going to be just for the NHS or for the government to stop that statistics. It's going to be us in the community to stop it, to reverse that statistics, to reduce it. So for Black mothers or brown mothers, we have 50% more likely to die in pregnancy. And
That's
we also have 50 more percent to suffer a stillbirth.
okay. So we're going to do two things now because you've touched on two areas. Pregnancy is one thing,
Yeah.
and dying in pregnancy is one thing, but having stillbirth, that's the babies that are now dying. So there's 50% of the babies that will die at birth, and there are 50% of the mothers that will die at birth. Is that's what I'm getting?
Let's get it right.
Oh, please.
For a Black mother, you are
Yeah.
5 times more likely to die than a white woman in this country.
Yep, that's that.
Yeah. And for a stillbirth, let me try and define stillbirth so people can get the understanding of it.
Please.
Again, as a Black mother like myself, I have 50% risk to have a stillbirth for a baby to die in the womb before I deliver that baby.
Okay.
That's
Let's do two things now. Before we come to the mother, let's talk about the stillbirth while you're on it, because I know that you also wrote an article on this. So bring us up to speed with understanding. You were about to tell us, this is about a situation where the baby is dying in the womb before they are born. So, so just tell us what could cause that first and foremost, and where we need what we need to do to improve.
Yes, this article was written by myself and Sarah, one of my colleagues, that is the lecturer, and she's also a Nigerian. And we do know we have a lot of statistics and a lot of research around Black and brown mother having more risk of having stillbirth. So we actually looked at the studies that are available, the reason why people from our community will be having a baby died before birth. So there are a lot of issues around it. The first one is access to care. Culturally, we don't disclose our pregnancy before 3 months, which is 12 weeks.
We don't want our village people to get involved.
Yes, whatever it is, we don't disclose it. Now, in the UK, if you get pregnant, in fact, the access is open right from 7 weeks. 7 weeks means the first month you meet your period and you know that you've tested positive being pregnant, that is the time you should be accessing the service. Again, in terms of how do I access the service, is it through my GP? In the past, it used to be just through the GP alone, but now it is not. As a matter of fact, you don't even have to have a GP. You don't have to go through your GP. Just walking into your local hospital, and not just local hospital, it could be any hospital that you want to have your baby anywhere in the UK. Just walk into that hospital and go to their maternity and tell them you are 4 weeks pregnant, you're 6 weeks pregnant, you are 7 weeks pregnant. So, and they will just start you, they will register you, and that way they will follow your pregnancy through. Because what many of us do not realize is if you access the maternity services at 12 weeks, you have missed a lot of screening that they would have done for you and your baby for the first 12 weeks or for the first 3 months of that pregnancy. Therefore, it's going to have a lot of impact as the pregnancy grows. So the one is access, early access. And the second one is engagement. There's some people just don't engage. Our community, we don't engage as much as we should. That is number one. The third one is for many of us that comes from Nigeria, they just I think they just drop in to Heathrow as soon as they want to drop their baby here in
Okay,
the UK.
so because I know that there is the figures also states that Nigeria, out of the African community, Nigerians, that particular ethnic group features higher
We are
on.
number one on the list
Wow.
of people that we have stillbirth, of people that we die more, in pregnancy, of people that we have a preterm labor before 38 weeks. So we are topping the list, unfortunately.
Wow, those statistics are serious. Please continue. So, because we're not accessing the service.
We're not accessing the service.
Accessing
Our diet contributes to it a lot. We
Uh-huh.
don't exercise. Accessing the service is the major thing. Engagement is the second bit. Our lifestyle contributes to it a lot. Our
Okay.
lifestyle, on the understanding of how pregnancy works as well, in terms of knowing your baby when your baby is not moving. If a baby is not, nobody else knows your baby than you. So even if you see a midwife, currently, one of the things that the government has actually put in place, by 2020, this year, it's supposed to be, 25% in reduction of stillbirths.
Wow.
And by 2025, the government is aiming to reduce stillbirth by 50%.
Okay.
And yes, the government is doing what they are doing, but as a community, we need to get the word out there. We need to get access improved. We need to get engagement improved. We need to get our lifestyle improved. Whatever it is that we need to do as a community, as a family, as an individual, we need to get it done. We need to ensure that we change the narrative of us dying in pregnancy, not in our African country, not in our homeland, but in the UK.
Okay, thank you so much for that. And now let me just, because I halted you speaking about, that was about stillbirth. Now let's have a look at the situation concerning the women that are dying, which is equally 50%. Again, Nigeria is leading on this. Talk to us about what's happening there.
The women that are dying, for Black women and Asian women, 5 times more than a white woman, a Caucasian woman. It's, Priscilla, this issue is not a UK issue alone. I'm sure you would have heard it in America as well. So unfortunately, in the developed world, we are dying more than we are in our home country, as it were. So what are the causes? There's a lot of anecdotal experience, research or records to say we're not being listened to, So when we go in, we are seeing that we are a strong Black woman, let's get on with it. So these are feedback that we get from our mothers.
Dr. Titi made a reference to being resilient.
Yes.
Our resilience misunderstood as being, the strong Black woman, as you've said, and therefore when we say we're hurting, they just think, oh, but you can cope with it.
Priscilla, I'm sorry, because I think if I look at the two sides of the coin, I'm a mother, I was a user, of the service as well as a professional in the service. So if I talk as a midwife, as a professional, I would say, I can talk for myself in terms of I listen to all women, and I can also talk for my colleagues that we do listen to all women. So it will really be, it's not part of our training not to listen, regardless of your race or your color. You're a pregnant woman that comes into the service, we listen to you. You have a named midwife, and that's one of the things that the government actually brought in as well in terms of continuity of carer. Not continuity of care, is this different? So the minute you engage the service, a midwife will be allocated to you. So you will have a midwife so this is about government also listening, that women are saying, or Black women, mothers are saying they are not being listened to. So if you do have a named midwife or a group of midwives of maximum 1 to 4 or 6 that follows you through your pregnancy, so you know whom to call, when you are, when you are having your baby, maybe the doctor is not listening to you, or your midwife that is with you is not listening to you, you have somebody that you can call. So those are the things that have been put in place now. So hopefully this data will change. However, even before the data start changing as a community, I think it is time that we, even if we're not being listened to, because that tops the one of the reasons why women are saying that they are dying, or again, in terms of women dying, it's about what Dr. Joko said around when we go home, we just pray about it. A typical example is when a woman goes into depression, postpartum, postnatal depression. Yes, in our community, is something that is okay. You'll be fine. Just get on with it. So suicide is part of that. It's one of the reasons why some women die in that report. And bleeding is also part of it. So there are many things that, and a woman can die from the day she delivers up to the 1 year after the baby is born. So there are a lot of things that women will be demonstrating, but within our community, we are just saying it is okay. The Lord will look through. The Lord will see us through. And those are the things we should actually we should be able to define what religious faith or faith is and what medical attention is. When a woman is not well, access the service, access the experts. And when it comes to spiritual care can actually be embedded with medical care equally.
Wow. Do you know, I feel as though I'm looking at the time and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, we need to do a part 2, 3, and 4 on this, because it seems like there's so much more. I feel as though right now we're leaving our men out, because obviously we need to, but it is important that we have this conversation today. Dr. Titi, I'm coming back to you. Thank you so much for all of that, Wendy. And I must say, online, I have some people that are saying thank you so much for the information that you're both giving. They're appreciating it. They're learning a lot. Thank you to both of you. So Dr. Banjoko, let me come back to you. I asked Wendy there, you used the word resilient earlier. And one of the things that was stated that I've seen in some of the articles, that I've written, that I have read. I saw them in the Ames Journal, for instance. It spoke about the fact that this whole point of our resilience, it's taking as though, because we're perceived as being much more resilient, when we do say sometimes in some quarters that I'm in pain, that is not taking on board with in the same measure as if our white counterparts said I was in pain.
Yes, when I use the word resilience, I always say to people, because we've had to be to cope with the pressures that we find ourselves in. When you live in a sort of a foreign society, you've had to learn, and obviously people therefore think, because your thresholds, I would describe it, are much higher. When you then complain, people think, well, why is she complaining? But some of that also is biases where people don't want to accept that actually, well, yes, I do have the right to complain. And it goes back to what I said at the beginning. And Wendy has also said that when there are issues, we do need to complain. Sometimes people, and I'm sure that people will be familiar with this, where you say something and they're not listening. You just know that they're not listening. Either it's uncomfortable or, well, I don't want to go there, I don't want to address it, but these are things that we have to articulate. And there are a number of things I personally have learned through the COVID is we have to learn to say things, whether in a respectful manner, whether people are comfortable or not. Sometimes we're trying to please other people outside the community, and therefore we adopt this attitude that actually, don't let me complain. Actually, if something is not right, we do need to start articulating it, even if people are going to be uncomfortable with what we say. Because the society does listen. If it's in a respectful manner, they have to listen. So the resilience to me, because my thresholds are higher, does not mean when I talk, you would expect that I therefore have to continue bearing what I am bearing. Or because you have seen another person from my community who has been able to bear the pain. Therefore, you have an expectation of me that I have to. And sometimes we have to speak to ourselves also, because sometimes we ourselves, we say in our language, "What's wrong with you? Just get on and so what? These are things. People's thresholds are different.
Yeah.
People's coping mechanisms are different, and what might not be an issue to you is definitely an issue to somebody else." And Wendy touched on all these sorts of things, and I think it's the service again. Let's remember, we're paying for this service. It is not a free service. It is
No.
for us to utilize it. It is for us to access it, and make sure we access it in an informed way. If you feel somebody's pushing you back, do you know that you are entitled to second opinion on the NHS?
Wow. I'm looking at time because we are running this for an hour, but I very quickly want to ask, because we did touch on COVID just then. COVID came as a shock to all of us, but I think the bigger shock was the fact that once again, people of BAME community were leading the statistics as those who were most poorly affected. Now, this is a terrible statistics, and some of the measures, some of the reasons that was given is because we were overcrowding. It's always being used. We're always being told, but that our socioeconomic situations is what is causing a lot of us to be more susceptible to COVID, or to die at childbirth, or to have a stillbirth, or whatever it may be. But how much does bias play in this? How much would you say that there was a degree of bias in this, or how much does racism play in these statistics that we're seeing, Doc?
So I touched on earlier about institutional racism and systemic racism, and that's where that comes into play. So most of the public health reports highlighted that occupational risk was a very big factor. And it was a very big factor because the frontline staff, not just in the NHS, it's in social care, the supermarket, security, the whole lot was dominated by the BAME community. And they were exposed, day in, day out in their day-to-day activities, taxi drivers and things like that. And that the policies and everything was geared, as far as I'm concerned, towards the white middle class upper people living in their homes. So when you say social distancing, they were the ones socially distancing. They were the ones not being exposed. And therefore, appropriate measures were not put in place to be able to address that. And that is where bias comes in, where you see things. So at the beginning of the testing, when testing first came back online, the narrative was you had to drive to a testing center. And I do recall asking how many people in the community that are from the BAME community can drive. And then the fact that you have to have the car yourself, because remember, at that point in time, at the height, you couldn't call a friend to take you to the testing center. So you have to drive. So that automatically cut a lot of people off. And then the final thing for me is that a lot of people in the BAME community are on, and those social are on 0-hour contracts, or on agency contracts, where if they don't work, they don't get paid. And if you need the money, what is the risk? The people therefore continue working. And I think the final thing, obviously within our own communities, some people use, again, we're hard workers, but sometimes it goes against us in that I'm fully aware that some people did every agency work they could get their hand on, because the white people were saying they weren't going to go to work, and the NHS needed them, social care needed them, the shops needed them. I mean, we all saw what happened. The shops, so people were doing shift upon shift, and therefore exposing themselves to greater risk. And I think all this is biased because people do not understand our world. And when people don't understand our world, they make policies and they make decisions based on their own world. And that's why now our duty, every one of us, wherever we are, when we're interacting, is to actually educate and inform people So they begin to understand the world in which they do not occupy, and therefore decisions have to be tailored towards those worlds.
So on that note, Doc, again, because of time, very quickly, you mentioned the fact that at the decision level, you've mentioned the fact that you're very lonely there as an ED within the NHS, and you've just mentioned now the fact that because there aren't that many of ourselves at those levels, the decisions that are made are not made with us as included as we should be. And you've just said we should all be educating and doing so. First of all, what is the NHS doing now, having learned the difference? I would imagine that they would have learned some things with all of those reports that they've had and all of that. What are they going forward? What are they doing? And also, what should we be doing within our community for a better service?
So I would say two key things. First of all, the NHS, in terms of one of the key things, even before COVID, there was the workforce race equality standard, where they were mandated that they have to improve BAME representation at every level to reflect the community they're serving. But because there is no fast track, because if you haven't done things, you can't just fast track like that. One of the things they're doing, and Wendy can talk to that because she's a BAME lead also in her organization, is that there's direct engagement now between the decision makers of every organization with the BAME network leads in their organization to hear, to listen, and to respond, and to make sure that they have programs in place that begins that pipeline of bringing people through, be it fast track, and it has to be intentional and it has to be purposeful. The other thing I would say also is, and they're doing a lot of risk assessment. The other thing is, you will notice, and everybody will notice now, not just in the NHS, diversity is on everybody's agenda. You will find lots of job applications coming out explicitly asking for people within the BAME community. Now, what I'm saying to people is, can you please apply? So even in the NHS, I'm aware of a number of organizations that are looking for non-exec people to come in. So they're going to go to the CCAL group to ask them to support them. And they're now willing to actually look, and this is where we need to support each other, to put in good applications, to nudge people we know that fit because one of the things I've learned is they nudge each other. So if there's a role coming, they nudge themselves. So I asked the question recently of one of my execs who is a white person. I said, who are you nudging? Who in the BAME community are you nudging? So that you can say, I think it would be good for you to apply for this job. I said, because if you do that, it has to be intentional and it has to be purposeful. So one of the things I'm saying to ourselves as a community, when you see applications and you see that strong word now, because there's a window of opportunity, lots of jobs where they're saying they want somebody, please encourage people to apply, to put in good applications if they fit the bill, because diversity is on everybody's agenda at this point in time.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. And Wendy, I'm coming to you as the BAME lead within, in your trust. Again, I have to ask that question with all your statistics that we've seen, whether it's a stillbirth or it's the death in pregnancies. What are the NHS doing? I know you said earlier that it's not up to just the NHS to do this, but surely they would be doing something more to reduce these statistics. And what should we do to reduce these statistics as well?
Priscilla, thanks. I've already mentioned that. No, they are doing a lot, I must say. The government is right at the top of the agenda. And we also have a chief midwifery officer that she's a Black woman, so she's not letting this go. Over the years, I think it's been swept under the carpet. But now it is right at the top of the agenda. Yes, the government is doing what they can. Yes, each individual trust is doing it. Everyone is coming together. The mothers are also coming together. But as a community, I think we know ourselves more. So it's about being educated, being informed, knowing your rights, knowing what to do, what is available for you. If you don't understand it, call someone. call your GP. If you're not getting through to your GP, like I said, go through your local hospital, call, ask questions, ask and ask and ask. There's never a stupid question, especially when you're pregnant. And when you're pregnant, look after your health. You know that we are prone to having blood pressure in pregnancy. You know, diabetes is a huge thing in pregnancy. And when you have all these diseases or medical reason with pregnancy is a risk for a woman. So in addition to that, if they now have all this comorbidity alongside with it, so you are even more at risk. Hence, it is our responsibility to engage the service, to attend all our appointments, to listen to the experts. And yes, please don't get me wrong, spirituality is part of the care as well. So add your prayer to it, but please let your medical obstetric, appointment care be number one. And then it can come along with your spiritual care. So that is for the community. In terms of the COVID, a lot of women are stayed away because that's another issue. That's one of the learning that we are taking away from this, because
Yeah.
obviously everybody is so scared and they do not want, and we've seen couple of maternal death during COVID. Again, Black women died during this COVID with their babies. So please do not stay away. If you are pregnant, engage with a service. You don't necessarily have to come in if you don't want to come in. A lot of trusts are now doing virtual clinics. So when they give you appointments to turn up on your phone or on the screen, please attend. And if you're bleeding or you're not feeling well, do not stay at home. Let the whole community look after this pregnant woman during this pandemic period. Get them into the hospital. The hospital is safe to come. It is safe to come and have your baby. Do not stay at home if you're not feeling well.
Wow. I wish time was not against me because, like I said, there's so much more to discuss. We've hardly touched on the men and some of their areas that they have acute issues, but I think that we're going to need to do this another day. But to both of you, it's been absolutely mind blowing. I have to say, we've learned so much from you. Those who are watching, myself, I have learned so much from you today. Thank you, both of you, so very much. Dr. Lola Banjoku, thank you so much for your time. I know
Thank
that
you.
you're not just working here in the UK, but you're also advising on so many boards and right across the continent of Africa. Also, you're extending yourself over there too. So thank you so very much for sharing your expertise, experience, and everything with us today. We're grateful.
Absolute pleasure, and thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And I hope we can have you back again because, like I said, we haven't even started on this conversation. And to Wendy, wow, thank you so very much. What can I say? You have blown us away with what you've shared with your experience and again your knowledge and everything that is going on within the sector that you're leading and managing. And we very much appreciate the time today, your contribution, everything that you have shared with us. And once again, I hope that you too will give us some more of your time in the future so that we can talk more, educate and inform our people a lot more, because I feel that this conversation needs to go on repeatedly a little bit longer. Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you very much for having me, Priscilla. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And to all of you that tuned in and stayed with us, I want to say thank you. And to all of you that are going to watch this at some point, thank you all so much. Once again, I must apologize that we started late. Technical issues, we're working on them. Hope that it's not going to continue next week. But thank you for your patience. Thank you for tuning in. But more than anything, I hope that you will join me again next week for our next episode. Until then, do enjoy your evening and remember, engage with the service. You have paid for it. Ask questions. Don't just shy away. Don't accept if you're not satisfied with an opinion. You can have a second opinion. Go in and ask questions. If you don't have a GP, go to the hospital. You've heard the ladies tonight. Don't stay at home. They can speak to you via your telephone. We've all been Zooming. We can't say, even if our technical skills were bad before, for technology, I think a lot of us have learned a thing or two over this COVID season. So please, please, please don't stay at home and don't stay silent. If you know, if you're anything like me, the slightest pain, as I begin to ask questions, because I need to know. I not only do I need to know, but I want to be comfortable. If I'm not comfortable, I just can't rest. So please, please don't keep quiet. Engage with your health care professionals. They can do it through the phone with you. You don't have to be at their surgery, but do not ignore the letters. Do not ignore the pains that you may have, the discomfort that you may have. Do not ignore them. Have them investigated. It is your right. Thank you so much. Take care. Until next week. See you then.